Hi, Eva.
Hi, who am I saying hi to? Pasta?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, Pasta. Are you going to do your
Hey,
intro?
welcome back to the Combo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
And I'm Fiorella. Okay, so we have our guest here today, our wonderful guest, independent journalist Eva Bartlett.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
You've been doing some amazing on the ground coverage and of the whole situation, going into these areas where a lot of journalists don't dare to go, putting your life on the line. And I wanted to have people that are on the ground to come on and talk about this, and specifically have had also great things to say about really what is happening, because it's so difficult to actually have any truth, to find the truth. And when you tell people in the Western world, especially in the United States right now, they look at you like you're insane. So thankful for the coverage. And I really just wanted to start off by discussing something that I think more journalists should be discussing, specifically because it like with Julian Assange, that affects us all. And when somebody like you that's doing such important work is put on a kill list, I think that more people should be discussing how insane that is. And so I just wanted you to tell us a little bit more about that Ukraine puts you on a kill list.
Yeah, and I will preface it by saying, of course, I'm not the only person. There are thousands, if not many, many more thousands of people, not only journalists, including Ukrainian journalists, but Ukrainian opposition members, normal civilians, people who have done something as seemingly harmless as driving a pensioner from the DPR to wherever they need to go to pick up their pension. So for that crime, being put on what is effectively a kill list. And I know the naysayers will say, well, how can you say this is a kill list? Well, what Ukraine does, or the people behind this site, which, the President Zelensky is very aware of the site, and I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially said, he doesn't, because there was a movement, I think in 2015, a person trying to get it taken down, and he effectively just said, well, no, it's not our place to interfere in media. Ironically, because that's the whole principle of this site, is to quash any sort of dissent and silence any sort of dissenting media. But what was I going to say? I had a point I was just going to make, but anyway, what I did was thinking earlier was like, just imagine if this kill list were, for example, Syrian or Russian. And one of the things that the apologist for this kill list will say, they'll say, you entered Ukraine illegally. Well, that's debatable, because the republics of the Donbass and Crimea are not a part of Ukraine any longer. They declared themselves autonomous. Crimea voted to return to Russia, as Crimeans told me when I went there in 2019. So this whole notion that I have illegally entered Ukraine is ridiculous, but let's just assume even that it has any merit in reality. We have seen for years journalists entering Syria illegally via Turkey, embedding with Al-Qaeda, embedding with ISIS, embedding with all the terrorist factions in Syria. Now, imagine that the Syrian government or somebody in line with the Syrian government implemented such a kill list. Imagine what kind of outcry you would have from the various, bodies to protect journalists, representatives of Western governments, the media, et cetera. But because it is Ukraine that has done this with the complicity of the West, there is no outcry. Now, on the note of myself personally, being on that kill list, just recently, CBC journalist has been reaching out to me. Now, CBC, as you know, is Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Canada's state-funded media, notorious war propagandist, not to be trusted on anything, perhaps not even the weather. And I'm very familiar by now, 2022, of how the media operates and how they reach out to journalists in a very polite tone to try to entrap them into an interview in which they will take, as they did with a Canadian colleague based in China, 3 seconds of a 20 or so minute interview in order to distort their words and cherry pick them and depict the person being targeted as whatever, the slander is. That's what CBC intends to do with me. I refuse to participate. I refuse to validate them as an objective and realistic media. They are completely propagandistic platform. But the point to be made about this particular journalist reaching out to me is that he did not reach out to me about the kill list, which has gotten a lot of publicity over the years, and particularly of late, I've been speaking out about it. He reached out to me about my participation in a tribunal in Moscow, tribunal on Ukraine's war crimes.
Mm-hmm.
My participation was my observations having visited the Donbass. At that point, it was 2 times, and now it's been 3 times. And I was giving my observations on what I saw and heard from civilians in the Donbass. That was my participation. And that's one of the reasons I'm currently listed on Ukraine's kill list. And so this journalist, he could not have known about my participation in this tribunal, to my knowledge, because I did not advertise it. So if he's following my social media, I didn't put it anywhere in my social media, mainly because I didn't have a link and I got busy. But if he's aware of the kill list and the entry on me, then he would be aware of my participation in this tribunal because the kill list specifies that. So the thing is, he's reached out to me in a condescendingly polite tone, wanting to interview me, but he doesn't want to interview me about the fact that a fellow Canadian journalist is on a kill list. And I think the point I was trying to make before that I kind of had a lapse of thought is that people whose names and personal information have been put on that kill list have been killed. And this is the thing, they put as much information, including home address, phone number, et cetera, on that list, and they call for the people to be liquidated. I mean, you can argue whether this is a kill list or not, but the fact is people have died as a result of being listed there. So this journalist representing CBC, who I don't think is acting on his own accord, I think he's acting on behalf of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, is not interested in discussing the fact that I am on a kill list, which could see me disappeared. He wants to discuss and distort my participation in a tribunal on Ukraine's war crimes. And I foresee that whatever garbage they come out with, the CBC, will be to taint me as an apologist for alleged crimes they attribute to Russia. And they will not talk at all about Ukraine's 8 years of war on the people of the Donbass and their manifold war crimes, or any of that, much less the kill list.
Yeah, and just one more thing. I just wanted to ask you, has any other journalist beside the CBC journalist reached out and asked you to interview you about what's like the threats you've received or the fact that you are on this kill list from Canada? Has any other journalist actually cared to ask you, hey, are you okay? We need to talk about this.
Yeah, 2 journalists with Maverick Media, independent media, reached out to me. Actually, and that's the thing. I think that's how. I think that's another means that the CBC became aware of the fact that I'm on the kill list. They interviewed me at length. It was almost a 2-hour interview, and they gave me freedom to speak, unlike the CBC would, about not only about the fact that I'm on this kill list, about, again, citing at length an article I wrote about it some years ago, because I wasn't placed on it recently. It's just recently gotten more notice, but also enabling me to speak about what I've seen in the Donbass on my trips there. And again, the civilians that have been bombarded by Ukraine in violation of the Minsk Accords with heavy weapons. And these journalists were very concerned about my well-being. Now, I've spent a lot of time in war zones. I've come under Israeli fire on more times than I could possibly list in my time in Gaza. And, being in Syria and close proximity to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups, you get accustomed to the danger and the risk of doing that sort of journalism. So I make that point to say, it's not going to intimidate me from doing journalism, but in principle, a journalist should be concerned when a fellow journalist is put on a kill list. And so I am grateful to these two Canadian journalists of Maverick Media for reaching out to me. And they said that they would try to alert other Canadian media and, do their best to speak to Canadian authorities about this. And I'm very grateful to them for that. I have to say, cynical, because I'm well aware of Canada's stance with regards to Ukraine. Canada's at least $1 billion of funding to Ukraine, which includes arming Ukraine, which includes arming the Nazi battalions within Ukraine. And the very real and widespread, as I understand, ultra-nationalist Ukrainian population within Canada itself, and the fact that our Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, is not only a proud descendant of a Nazi collaborator, but she herself is very active in Ukraine, very active within the nationalist, to put it politely, the extremist Ukrainian community in Canada.
What do you think about the breaking point, though, at this point, Eva? Because it's like, I remember when it came to the Azov Battalion, BBC did a little piece years before this whole controversy got started. I think there's a lot of people now, if you just kind of judge on, when you look at the Twitter bots or, who they're pushing back against, they're pushing back against people who've kind of come to light about when it comes to the Azov Battalion and who we're funding. How do you think it is in Canada? I mean, shouldn't they be either further along the line, especially since this kind of like Nazism is just right in their face?
You would think so, but and now I'm not the most well versed, and I intend to change that. But I'm not the most well versed on Canada's history of supporting Nazis and bringing them to Canada, and encouraging the continuation of the Nazi ideology, which Canada has done. But there are still monuments to Nazis in Canada, and
Really?
Whereas in this woke age of tearing down historical monuments to Nazis go untouched in Canada. I think there's some excellent journalists that revealed in great depth Chrystia Freeland's Nazi ancestry, and the fact that it isn't just a case of her being a descendant of somebody who had those values or lack thereof, but the fact that she herself holds them. I'm trying to remember their name. They're based in Alberta. They've done excellent research, but unfortunately, you would expect based on Canada's reputation as being this peaceful nation, you would expect that this would be abhorrent and repellent, and particularly given that the Zionist lobby in Canada is so strong. So anytime anyone launches any sort of very valid criticism about Israel and its endless acts of terrorism against the Palestinian people, you get labeled anti-Semitic and this and that. You would expect, that the same Zionist lobby would be outspoken over the fact that there are still statues memorializing Nazis in Canada, but no, it's pretty upside down world in Canada.
Mm.
You were interviewing several people on the ground for weeks. I mean, and we're interacting with other journalists. Tell us about what you saw in terms of the Russian treatment of civilians, because as you know, all you hear in the States is how Russians are killing Ukrainians en masse, how they're the ones bombing schools, hospitals. We know a lot of this, of course, has been debunked, thankfully for alternative media and other journalists like yourself. But tell us about what you specifically saw on the ground.
Well, and I will preface that by saying, bear in mind that I was in the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. So I was not in Ukraine. I have been in Ukraine, but because I'm on a kill list, obviously I can't go there. So what I'm talking about is what I've seen in the Donbass republics. Perfect. And also keep in mind that the majority, if not the overwhelming majority of people in those republics identify as Russian and ethnic Russian. So it doesn't make sense that Russia, which is aiding the Donbass forces in reclaiming areas that were held by Ukraine, it doesn't make sense that Russian forces would be abusing the people there, because they are allies, right? And so that's kind of one major hole with the Western reports on alleged atrocities. by Russian forces against the people in the areas they've reclaimed or helped the Donbass forces reclaim. But what I saw was, I have to say, similar to what I've seen in Syria, in that when an area is restored or when terrorists are extracted from an area. So in Syria, these were Al-Qaeda, Ahrar Sham, Jaish al-Islam, all the other alphabet soup of terrorists. And in the Donbass, these are the Ukrainian forces and the Nazi battalions with them. When they are removed from an area, then efforts to restabilize the area begin right away. And so you see, immense food aid deliveries coming into these areas. It's of course nothing happens 100% perfectly and quickly, but what I saw was people forming orderly lines, waiting for their turn to go up and receive food aid, and a generous amount of food aid being distributed. I know from fellow colleagues who've had the chance, for example, to return to areas where they saw, for example, the city of Volnovakha. I've been there just the one time, but I have colleagues that have been there a couple of times. So they were there shortly after it was liberated, which I think, if I remember correctly, was in early March. And then they went back there 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. And they were saying, already the progress that they saw in the space of 2 or 3 weeks was pretty considerable, considering that while these areas have been liberated, there are still fights in other areas to continue liberating areas. So, in spite of the fact that resources are stretched throughout the Donbass republics, in liberated areas, the rebuilding, maybe not rebuilding, but restoration of stability process is pretty quick. And what else have I seen? I have to be very clear. I don't speak Russian, whereas when I'm in Syria, I can speak Arabic, but I don't speak Russian. So I am relying on translators, and whether in live or later on. But what I've seen from being with people who speak Russian and or later having my videos translated is, again, and you'll see this from, if people are following a variety of different Telegram channels, you'll see over and over again people thanking the Russian forces for coming, or the Russian and the Donbass forces for coming, and also very, very clearly blaming the Ukrainian forces for occupying residential areas, for occupying infrastructure like schools and hospitals, and not only occupying, but of course militarizing them. Yeah. And this is precisely what terrorist groups did in Syria, precisely the same playbook. In fact, I keep saying, and I'm not the only one, of course, that everything we're seeing playing out with regards to how Russia and the Donbass forces are advancing, with regards to how the Ukrainian forces use civilians as human shields, and with regards to how the media is portraying things, it's the same as we saw in Syria, the exact same. All the fabricated stories, the hoaxes, and in the cases where there have been hospitals or schools damaged by liberating forces, it has been precisely because they have been occupied, militarized, and in many cases mined by Ukrainian forces. And that is something, when I went to Volnovakha, there was the chief physician of the main hospital there. He specifically told a group of journalists I was there with in March, he specifically said there were Ukrainian forces in the hospital, and before they left, before they retreated from the hospital, they mined the intensive care unit. So he said that very clearly, and the 2 French mainstream media outlets that were with us completely omitted that. They cherry-picked, as the CBC intended to do with me, they cherry-picked 2 seconds of him saying something that wasn't very clear. And they basically said, we don't know why there's this destruction, but it's for sure Russia's fault. And that's also the same playbook as we saw in Syria. I remember in 2014, Lise Doucet of the CBC was present in Damascus when I was there for my first time in April 2014, and an elementary school in the old city was shelled by terrorists in eastern Ghouta. And her later report was to say, well, it's not known who's doing the shelling. It could be the regime. And of course, that was not the truth. Anybody who was living there knew exactly where those shells were coming from on a daily basis, and it was from eastern Ghouta. So we're seeing the same war propaganda tactics, the same tactics by the Ukrainian forces of occupying civilian and and hospital and school infrastructure.
Mhm.
And we're also seeing people ask, like, why is it taking so long for Russia and the Donbass forces to liberate areas? Because now, if you're paying attention to media from Donetsk, for example, you'll see an increase, a dramatic increase of Ukrainian forces shelling the city, and it's gotten incredibly brutal. Of late. I mean, it's been bad the last 8 years, but it's really increased. And so people are saying, why is this happening? Why isn't Russia taking them out? Why aren't the Donbass forces taking them out? Well, from my understanding, there's a couple of reasons. One is that they're well entrenched, and I would highly recommend people to follow Brian Berlatek. He has a military background, and he in fact, I was just listening to one of his videos before we started, and he was describing how Ukraine has had 8 years to well and deeply entrench themselves around the Donbass, which makes it difficult to remove them. But the other factor is that Russia and the Donbass forces know of these tactics of using civilians as human shields, and they're reluctant to always fire back.
Right.
I think it's also part of the tactic from Ukraine to say, let's make sure we pull the Russians to come further into Western Ukraine, therefore making them look like the aggressors so we can still go forth with our propaganda campaign. But to be honest with you, Eva, I really thought it was going to be a hard sell from the get-go that the mainstream media and the United States government, the Western government, was going to really try to sell this whole situation in Donetsk, trying to make the Russians look like an invading army, especially when if you've done any research to see that region and whatnot, you'd understand these are ethnic speaking Russians and whatnot, who really, love their alignment with Mother Russia. Have you traveled into any areas yet where there might be some kind of like a little conflict where you see a mixture of people who are saying, no, we're still somewhat Ukrainians and the Russians have no business being here? Because it seems like, in addition to making sure that Donetsk is liberated, that there's going to be some areas that the Russian Federation are going to take away from Ukraine for strategic purposes, like cutting them off of the Black Sea. Have you got into any of those little crevices where you've seen a little pushback from a Ukrainian side?
No, I have not, and I'm certainly open to hearing people if they want to, express that opinion. I'm not going to say you can't say that. I'm certainly open to listening to them and sharing their opinion. But I have not been in areas like that. I mean, I do intend on going back if I'm able to reach some of the areas outside of the Donbass that have been recovered or that have been taken. Then I would happily, talk to people, or with the aid of a translator, talk to people. But thus far, I don't have that experience now.
I want to talk a little bit more about the Nazi element, because as you know, they're rebranding themselves with their symbols, and they're doing everything they can here to whitewash the fact that, they'll say, well, it's a minority, but they don't talk about how they're powerful minority. They're the most dangerous. And so what elements of results and consequences on the people of the Donbass region have you seen from the Azov battalion, the ultra-nationalist, far-right, paramilitary, fascist entities that exist?
Well, if I'm speaking of my personal experience, it would be in the Lugansk People's Republic, in a village whose name eludes me at the moment, but it is north and slightly west of Lugansk. And it was the area that had been a former factory was turned by the Aidar battalion into a prison. And both people that were part of the Lugansk defenders of the militia, and also civilians, were kept there in horrendous conditions and were tortured. It's believed some were executed. It's not known how many might have been executed, but certainly torture was done, and it was committed there by the Aidar battalion. And so that's just one incident, but you have, I also recommend Lugansk-based journalist George Eliasson. He lives there. He's been there, I want to say, for a decade, maybe less, maybe more, but he certainly has been there for a while. And he can speak about things like actual mass graves committed, whether by the Nazi battalions or the Ukrainian forces or combined, where there is actually an RT documentary featuring George Eliasson, and he speaks about how bodies found in that mass grave were decapitated, which is, ISIS style things. And actually, even when I was doing a report on the Aidar prison I visited, I found Amnesty International even was able, like Amnesty is not my go-to for honest reports, but even back in 2014, they said Aydar is guilty of war crimes. And then I think it was Newsweek compared Aydar's actions there to ISIS. So, I mean, that's just one example. But again, if you look at reports from people like Patrick Lancaster or Russian or Donbass media that have had a lot of time in Mariupol and had a lot of chance to interview people in Mariupol, or I also highly recommend people like Maxim Grigoriev, who's done excellent work taking testimonies from civilians in Syria prior, in Mariupol and other areas now. And you'll have countless testimonies of people who have direct experience with Aydar and Azov, and can speak at length of the torture they endured under these Nazi battalions. And it is definitely misleading, and it is definitely intellectually dishonest of Western media and talking heads to downplay the effect of these Nazi battalions on the people of not only of the Donbass, but of all of Ukraine.
Yeah. Pasta, did you have a question?
No, go ahead. Next one.
Okay. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about well, you've already talked about the similarities. So, you know, you saw in Syria and how this has happened before, but can you give a little bit more of insight into the false flag attempts? Because Russia is always seemed to be ahead of the Ukrainian media, Western-backed, forces in anticipating and saying, "Hey, this is what's going to happen." They're gonna try to frame us and say Russia bombed the school, but really this is what's happening. The false flag attempts. Just how much of that have you seen or looked on from other journalists and reports?
I would say most of what I've seen is via other journalists, via Telegram channels. And Russia, I would say, has had, well, I mean, I probably couldn't limit it only to Syria, but even if we just look at Syria, Russia has had, years of attempted false flags in Syria to learn from how terrorists operate in Syria and how their comrades, their brethren in Ukraine would operate. The one that I could personally address was the claim of a mass grave to the west of Mariupol. This is a claim that was cited from, they called him the mayor of Mariupol. He was formerly the mayor of Mariupol. I don't know his whereabouts. According to two men I met at what is actually just a normal cemetery that was dubbed by all of Western media as a mass grave, according to them, the mayor fled early on in Russia's military operation. So he's not even in the vicinity yet. He's cited, just like media cited various unnamed activists or media activists or what have you in Syria for their various hoaxes and false flags. This mayor is cited as a reputable source for his claim, and he actually claimed it was the worst crime of the 21st century, this alleged mass grave to the west of Mariupol. He claimed it was like 30 meters wide, a big pit, and bodies were thrown in, and that Russians were like at night trying to bury the dead, trying to cover their war crimes. And he claimed up to 9,000 bodies were buried there. And what then Western media did was they used like satellite technology. I forget the name of the company, but for an average media consumer, they see what looks like, well, it was a satellite image, although I'm pretty certain they could have zoomed in more and given more clarity to what I saw when I went there. But what you see in the murky satellite images on the Washington Post, et cetera, looks like, oh my goodness, there's all this new activity and it must be a mass grave. But when I went to the area in question, Mangush or Manhush in Ukrainian, it was near an existing cemetery. There were new graves, but it was not a pit. And I tallied up now, I think the tally was between 300 and 400 new graves, nearly 100 of which were empty. So awaiting newly deceased. And the rest of them were mounds that had either the markings of the person, if it was known who was deceased, and their date of birth, and if not, they were numbered. And then, as I just mentioned, there were two grave diggers that showed up while I was there with a fellow journalist, Roman Kasarov. And these two grave diggers were frankly pissed off at the allegations of a mass grave. And they said, like, no, we work here. We know who's buried here. We've buried people individually in coffins, including Ukrainian soldiers. And, even I have to say, people just want to believe this narrative so much that even after showing that, and even Roman is with RT, and he had two cameramen, one of whom had a drone, to take aerial footage and show that, the site that we're showing from the ground perspective does correspond to the murky satellite images. Even after that, people are still like, oh, well, you weren't at the right site, or, oh, well, those mounds were buried over the actual mass grave, disregarding the fact that we had two witnesses who work in the graveyard and stated very definitively there's no mass grave, and instead clinging on to the words of a runaway mayor who's nowhere to be seen and just spouting nonsense, So that's one hoax I can personally kind of have said, have some role, or I've at least witnessed, and can debunk in that regard. But the rest of it, I have to say, I've seen online, but it's been ridiculous. You have people making claims of Ukrainian forces shooting down Russian planes, and it turns out it's based on a video game.
It goes to Kiev.
Yeah, exactly. This Valiant goes to Kiev. And I wasn't even aware of it at the time, because I guess I must have been, I don't know when it came out, but maybe I was in the Donbass at the time, but I wasn't even aware of that garbage. And then when I looked into it and then saw afterwards that it was based on a video game, it's just laughable. You have
Day two, Eva. Day two that I saw that stuff out there. They're
it's day two. Okay,
like
okay.
Right out of the gate, they started. I think they went for a certain demographic, and they got them for a little bit. But then, they had to admit it was bullshit, and then they try to bring it back, and it's. Yeah, people keep trying to revive this Ghost of Kiev story, and it is just a video game. It's pretty phony.
Well, you have Mr. Four-Star General McCaffrey, I think his name is, also tweeting some other video game footage and claiming similarly Ukrainian victory. But I think another one that's very timely right now is this constant claim by by the Ukrainian government and Western media and Western representatives that Russia is causing a famine by preventing Ukraine from exporting grains. Well, that's complete nonsense, because the Russian authorities have made very clear, I think it's the port of Odessa, right, that is mined by the Ukrainian forces. The Russian government has made very clear, like, number one, it's mined by Ukraine. And number two, Russia is willing to help demine. And also Russia is willing to give safe passage through other ports, so this is not a question of Russia preventing Ukraine from exporting its precious wheat and grains, but this is how it's being depicted in Western media. And on top of that, by the way, there was some other report about, I think, a shipment of, I'm not sure what it was. It wasn't grain. It was some other cargo leaving Mariupol. And this is being depicted by Western media as Russia looting Ukraine. Now, let's just pause and recall that America has been actively looting Syria of its wheat and its oil for years and years and years. And we do not see Western media speaking about actual looting.
Yeah. And it's crazy because the EU is kind of have the same kind of mentality, the way that the United States always blames Putin for the oil. It's Putin's price hike. Now you hear the EU talking about the famish issue and whatnot, like having ties to Jordan and whatnot. I believe you retweeted this. I saw this the other day. But this is something that can have some really serious long-term effects. It's not just about looting, it's about destroying. And wouldn't that have just a longer effect than if we were just stealing items? They're actually destroying the infrastructure, especially when it comes to the breadbasket of the world, when it comes to Ukraine.
Yeah. Now, when you're talking about something I retweeted, you mean with regards to Ukraine or Syria?
You were talking about Ukraine. Let me pull it up here. I think it was the EU blaming, and you were talking about the mining of the ports.
Yeah.
And it should be blamed on Kiev, excuse me, I shouldn't say Kiev. I'm talking.
See, that's the Western media
language. Yeah. Yeah, but no, here it is. And you were talking about it. That's why it was fresh off my mind. You just kind of jumped into it. The fact is that they're destroying a lot of the food supply inside Ukraine. It's they're self-destructing on purpose. It's really, really some really dark entities that are at work here in Ukraine.
Yeah, I definitely think there's an element to that as well. And also the other thing is that the constant, well, Russia is losing this conflict, Ukraine is winning, Ukraine is winning. Based on your experience and what you've seen, and also, of course, that of other journalists on Telegram that I know have been the salvation to contradict these mainstream views. What is Ukraine done in terms of quote unquote winning this conflict?
It is, and the West continuing to prolong it is just prolonging misery and loss of life when it does occur. And I think even I think there's a point when Ukraine was actually willing to come to the table. I might be wrong about that, but certainly by this point, and this is again referring to a video I was listening, Brian Berlatek was making this point, like Ukraine could have come to the table. Well, Ukraine could have, first of all, like not committed the war, frankly, the genocide against the people of the Donbass since 2014. Ukraine could have come to the table when President Putin made his speech and made that final offer before the military operation began to, have more conversation. Ukraine could have come to the table over the 8 years it's been waging war, and it still could. And each day that the West, sends more weapons and promotes more talk of war is another day that it's just prolonging something that is futile at this point. If they think that Russia is going to just stop its military operation, they're wrong. I think now I'm not a military analyst, but I think what is being misconstrued in Western media is they have been claiming, Russia wanted to take Kiev or it wanted to take other cities and it failed because, like you just said, they're trying to portray Russia as failing. But that was not Russia's objective. Russia's objective, from my understanding, has been so far to liberate these areas of the Donbass, restore security, stop Ukraine's war in the Donbass. And after that, I can't say, but the fact that it has not taken Kiev or other cities is not an indication of failure on Russia's part. It's an indication of propaganda or at best a gross misunderstanding on the West part.
But don't you think that there could be, and I'm just asking your opinion because you were able to get on the ground, that might be a mistake in itself to kind of hold back and only try to protect those areas, since there's a lot of shelling going from the Ukrainian, proper Ukrainian now, as we should say, area. Because if it's not going to stop and they're going to get arms and arms and arms until eventually this government is removed, until the Zelensky government is removed, how can we be assured that the war will never stop, or at least the firing from the militias that's left of the Ukrainian army?
I can't really answer that. I think I was looking at a map earlier today. If I remember, it was saying, trying to remember which channel it was, but anyway, I think it was saying there was basically one supply route left. I might be wrong about that. But I think, like I was saying earlier, Ukrainian forces are so well entrenched because they've had 8 years to do exactly. So around the Donbass. And they at that close proximity, they can do a lot of damage to the people of Donbass. So I see why that would be Russia's priority at this moment. I think most of the damage, from what I can see, is coming from those forces the closest to the Donbass and not from further afoot.
Yeah.
But this one question is just one of the last ones I'm going to ask, but I just wanted to touch on this because a lot of the discussion has been around, is Russia an actual adversarial power to this NATO globalist agenda that we're seeing? We're looking at the Bilderberg group meeting that nobody's talking about except a few of us. And it's just so obvious that there's something there. You had, the highest echelons of secret society meeting. You had Ukrainian politicians. Zelensky is allegedly made an appearance via Zoom. So what do you, the question is, do you see Russia as an actual adversarial power to this agenda based on your reporting, based on your knowledge?
That's a hard question. There's so much speculation about that. And I have to say, my feeling is based on intuition, and I can't give you like solid arguments to back my feeling that Russia is against the agenda. Why did I choose to move to Russia? Because I felt intuitively that it wasn't a part of this globalist agenda. Sure, yes, we see things that certain analysts or certain writers can attribute to Russia being a part of it. Mm-hmm. But I think that we just don't have all of the factors, and we never will have all the factors. And you know, at the end of the day, we can speculate as much as we want, but we don't really know what's going on. And the other thing I've seen people that want to definitively say Russia's a part of it, you know, they'll say, well, you know, Putin met with so-and-so. Well, he's a diplomat, you know, he does meet with people. It doesn't mean necessarily an endorsement. And even if you see Russia going along with certain policies that have to do with, you know, the COVID agenda, I've come to believe that we can't decide based on that because we don't know all the factors. We don't know what's the reasoning behind. For example, in 2020, I was in Syria for 6 months, and Syria went along with certain policies, and then they dropped the policies. They nominally had some policies, and my line of thought at that time was, well, for Syria, it was a different equation. Syria was a rock and a hard place. It had almost the entire world against it. If it didn't go along with certain policies, then that gives more fodder to the people that want to accuse the government of not taking care of its people, et cetera, et cetera. With Russia, I know it's a different situation. I can't explain why there have been elements of Russia going along with certain, for example, COVID policies. But back to my intuitive feeling, it doesn't make sense that Russia, which has frankly fought off the perversions of the West and continues to do so, would be going along with this project, which I do believe exists, that would see all of Russia's, you know, culture and borders disappear or disseminate. Like it rationally doesn't make sense to me. I feel like I'm not going to say like, I'm not going to speak about like grand chessboard or any of that stuff. I just feel like intuitively we will see that Russia is not a part of this, but you know, I sit to be corrected. That's pretty much as the most I can say. I just don't feel like it. I think Russia has such a rich culture and history, and also stands to benefit from a multipolar world, you know, whereas that's not what this globalist agenda wants. And we're seeing more and more alliances with other nations that have been oppressed or whatever by America's unilateral stance. So I don't know, we'll see. But I mean, what about you? What's your take on this?
I mean, I see that the United States is allowing Venezuela to ship oil to Europe. And so that to me just shows a sign of weakness, despite the perception they're trying to build that, you know, they still hold this unilateral power in the world. What we're seeing is the building of relationships between China, between Russia, Iran, and also the global South, both in Africa and of course, South America and Latin America are rebelling against this globalist agenda. President of Mexico, AMLO, just decided he decided a few days ago that he wasn't going to go to the Democracy Summit of the Americas. And in spite of the United States State Department trying to convince him otherwise. And so I think what you're seeing is a marked shift to this multipolar world. How that's going to look like is up in the air. We don't really know the forces involved. And I think it's more than nation states. I think it's actual, you know, sectors of power that I think are going into this. But I 100% agree with you. I think Russia is a very ethnically rich and Eastern nation that has suffered a lot because of US hegemony and NATO. So I really have a hard time thinking that they're just going to follow along with this global agenda. And Pasta, I don't know if you disagree with that or not, because I know you were kind of iffy before.
I'm still iffy. I mean, I have the same questions as Eva too, as well, when you talk about the COVID stuff. But, you know, I mean, I heard some type of possibilities when people were talking about what was going on with China, you know, like in Shanghai, where like, was it a shakedown? Because there was obviously ties to the West in Shanghai. And did China go in there acting like they were using this whole COVID situation to kind of weed people out? Where they came to the COVID situation, did Putin and the Russian Federation just shoot everybody up with placebos to act like they were going along to get along? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I certainly have questions all over the place. I can tell you this much from seeing the Western media freak out the way they are and seeing Putin kind of like tie commodities completely to the ruble. It definitely does seem like a shun in the Western's face. And I'm just looking more at like China and India, what's going on. I have more questions with China. It always seems like they have more financial ties when it comes to the COVID situation and whatnot. But I don't know. I don't know if it's all theater. I don't know what to think. But if I had to roll the dice and put, take my chances, it's like I'm thinking about, maybe moving to Russia myself one day, to be honest with you, from seeing what's going on in the West. But, I don't know. That is the question. And I think a lot of people are continuing to ask these questions. And that's why we have to continue to get people like yourself on who've been in that region, who understand what's going on a little bit more clearly than what the mainstream media is telling us all here back at home.
Well, thank you, Eva, for coming on and having this conversation. We really appreciate it. I know you have a great Telegram channel. Would you let everybody know what that is and wherever we can find your work?
Oh yeah, it's well, I called it reality theories because as you know, we're all called conspiracy theorists, and I decided to flip that.
Great name.
So yeah, it's reality theories. I'll send you the link. And I'm more active there than on Twitter or Facebook for obvious reasons. So yeah, appreciate you plugging that. And I will hopefully be back in the Donbass in the near future. So whatever I can post, internet allowing, I will be posting there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eva. We really appreciate your work and really taking risks to do the work you do, and all of the other journalists that put their life on the line. Thank you for recommending them, because I'm sure people may not know them. So thank you.
Awesome. And thank you very much for having me on.
Eva, make sure you come back on the morning show. You can come really early so you don't have to stay up extra late over there. We understand the time difference, so we really do appreciate you staying up a little extra here to come on the Combo Couch. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
See you next time. Guys, did we ever get on the Rockfin or no?
No.
No? Okay, because I do have to leave. I was thinking I do have to leave maybe 30 minutes. So
We'll just go over the Bilderberg stuff, and then we'll just leave the stuff for the next stuff for tomorrow.
Or you can do it yourself. Whatever. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So the Rockfin is up. Okay. Slide number 10. All right, so fams, thank you for diving with us on this whole thing. That was really awesome, and I think we'll cut it up and put it on Rockfin fully, since it didn't get there in the beginning. But I don't really see that many independent U.S. shows like us interviewing enough of the people who have been in the Donbass. I don't know, Pasta. I feel like that's a crime. I don't understand. But there's a difference between, we can say all these things, but being on the ground, it really makes a difference. That's why we go on the ground as much as possible. And I hope to eventually make it over there myself, since I am going to Moscow. Now, this is all part of this whole thing. That's why I asked Eva the last question, because I thought this whole secret meeting, and the reason I'm calling it secret meeting in the title is because I don't know if you all know, but if you say and to the word Bilderberg too much, they take you off the algorithm. They go after you. I've seen another video of these guys who were actually at the building talk about that. Also, Franco said that he was getting they were shifting his numbers, and that's true. That's not they do this. And so I called it a secret meeting that few people are talking about. And, this is after a 2-year gap, right? For the quote unquote pandemic. And the NATO Secretary General came. And of course, this was in the Oriental Hotel in DC. Franco just went, Max just went, another journalist just went. and that's it. I mean, they normally have hundreds of people covering this, and I don't know what happened in between then and now.
Well, they kept it secret. That's why they kept it really quiet. They kept it on the download. You couldn't get ahead of it this time.
Okay.
And then it just popped up last second. In fact, Burmis was on the show Friday. He got wind of it Thursday, like late, that they were looking, and the way they were able to discover it kind of leaked on out is that the EU, some members of the EU had it on their schedule, and they were able to kind of grab it that way, and it leaked out that way. And all of a sudden it was like, blowing the whistle. We were on Friday day, we were asking David Crow, who was in DC, David, get over to this area. Here's the hospital. Here's the hotel. Get on over there, see what's going on. But that's why there was not a lot of information this time, because I think that people are starting to put things together. And with that being said, they're going to say, hey, why are some of these people here, CEOs, and talking with all these different lawmakers and whatnot? So, I mean, yeah, they kept it quiet. And eventually some stuff leaked out, and that's why I got some bodies over there. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it included heads of NATO, CIA, GCHQ, the U.S. National Security Council, 2 European prime ministers, and of course, tech billionaires and Henry Kissinger. This article, by the way, is from The Guardian, and it's Melissa Bealey put it out on Telegram, and it's the journalist's name is escapes my mind right now. But he's one of the few more independent journalists that remain at The Guardian. So that's the reason I put up a Guardian article, because of that. But, I'm going to go on slide 13. So the conference is a high-level Council of War headlined by Secretary General of NATO, Bilderberg veterans Jens Stoltenberg, who joined the Mandarin Oriental Hotel by the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Marakova. And that's who what we were talking about earlier, who has these ties, and the CEO of Naftogaz, the state-owned Ukrainian oil and gas company. And, they met in this whole secret elite era. And we're going to watch some of the videos that Max posted. I forgot to put Franco's video, but maybe we can find it. And of course, there's video screens everywhere, so they could bring in people via Zoom. Zelensky is, of course, reported to have come in as well. And Palantir, who Pasta is going to explain, really remind everybody who they are. Whitney Webb has done tons of work on Palantir, but was set up by the Builder Group insider Peter Thiel and Gray Zone. A lot of people have written countless articles on them, and agreed to give digital support. So Palantir agreed to give digital support to the Ukrainian army, and that was according to a tweet by the country's deputy prime minister. Now, we know that when Pasta and I talk about imperialism, when we talk about these entities, right, there's a reason why we don't separate the COVID agenda, the globalist agenda, from the imperialism, because it's all tied together. And nothing proves that point more than this meeting right here, where you have big pharma, you have surveillance state, you have politicians, you have billionaires, you have the CIA, all these people coming together. So it's absolutely stupid, and really, really grinds my gears when I see the left separate the COVID agenda as if it's separate from this whole entity. And I just wanted to say that quickly, Pasta, because I think that needs to be said.
Yeah, well, Palantir founder is Peter Thiel, who was also at this meeting as well, too. And the crazy thing about it is that he also was with Facebook for quite some time, and now he then invested and bought into Rumble. So a lot of people are understanding what a controlled opposition is. It's not just controlling things on one side, it's controlling things on both sides. And there's Peter Thiel is a perfect example of that. And this software company has been involved when it comes to working with militaries around the world, or friendly militaries and whatnot. And it's kind of the same reason why we would question, like, the Elon Musk, with his Skylink or whatever you call that situation like that. It seems like everybody's working hand in hand and whatnot, but that's who Palantir is. There's a new CEO of Palantir, and that person was also involved in the Bilderberg meeting. But it is just one of those things when you have to start saying to yourself, what is going on at these meetings? Not the fact that we could just point fingers and go, oh, what's going on? But this is the head of, like you mentioned, the head of the CIA was there. This is Kissinger. This is a Rockefeller group that was started basically right after World War II. And a lot of some of the decisions they've sat around these big tables and talked about have come to fruition. You know what I'm saying? Like the EU and whatnot. So, I mean, these are all the heads that need to be there, all the people who control what you hear, what you say, what you can say, what you're allowed to say, and all the enforcers involved, including lawmakers too, as well. So, I mean, it's just, it is something that we have to start looking into more. I think it does kind of shine a light of what's going on. People have been covering this stuff for years, fam, including the Alex Jones, and Mike Tracy was at one years ago, and Jason Burmis and all these guys have been looking into stuff. Luke Randowski, We Are Change. This is everything we've talked about when it comes to a one world government and whatnot. I was looking for a little bit more of the Trump connections, like we saw Pompeo and Kushner in the past go to these situations. I was trying to look and see if there was any Putin kind of involvement here as well. So I have to look into it more to see if we got any more links there. But I have not seen a lot of those particular links, especially when it's coming from the Russian Federation.
Yeah, and just a reminder, Klaus Schwab, the head of Davos, was also there, and
chairman for many years. Yeah.
He was in the steering committee, and we've been talking about the Great Reset. We've been talking about the whole disruption of the global financial system, that whole thing for a while now. Like I said, a lot of people were covering it before. Now, when it's been accepted after it being called a conspiracy smoothie, now some people have jumped up and touched the surface levels of it, but it's been a thing for a while. Also, there was the CEO of oil giants BP, Shell, and Total, and the post-pandemic health was the CEO of Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline, who are the Wall Street investors. I mean, so you have Big Pharma, you have Wall Street, you have all these entities, and of course, it's not being covered. Like Pasta said, it was extremely secretive. But William Burns, of course, William Burns is a former U.S. ambassador to Russia, and he was elected to be the on Bilderberg's committee, the steering committee, a few months before Joe Biden gave him the job. And then he resigned his seat. And then 4 other active intelligence chiefs attended, including the head of the UK government's communication headquarters, the director of France's external intelligence agencies, DGSE, and the leader of US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. So you have like everybody's name right here. You have David Petraeus, also former spy chief, and John Sawers, now a board member of the Bilderberg Group, who was a former M16. So this whole thing encompasses all of them. And you can't forget about Kissinger, who has been attending this event since 1957.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, this started right after World War II. You know what I'm saying? This was the merger in the beginning of the CIA, following and taking orders. It's a Rockefeller type group, a Rockefeller group. And like, these are the people, these are the masters of the universe right here, right now.
Right. These are the, fascists without the uniform, without the Klan suit. These are the people that are discussing the things that encompass millions of people, that involve millions of people. And how is that allowed to be kept a secret? The public has a right to know. Journalists have a right to investigate, and that's just not being allowed. So they talk about governance and funding if you go to the direct website. And we know that this is a steering committee, governs a foundation and designates chairs or co-chairs. And so they want to have this private entity of sorts. And like Pasta said, it was founded a long time ago in 1954. We're not going to go over all of that. I just wanted you guys to see that, they explain this. They're explaining themselves because of the fact that a lot of people started speaking out, and they put out, the website. So they explain sort of the surface of what they're doing, but they don't really admit obviously the decision making. And of course, anybody would love to be a fly on the wall of that. But some of the topics that they were discussing on slide 19 were, geopolitical realignments, which is exactly what we've been talking about. NATO challenges, China, Indo-Pacific realignment, Russia, government and economy, disruption of the global financial system, disinformation, energy security and sustainability, post-pandemic health, fragmentation of democratic societies, of course, in their terms of what they consider democratic societies, trade and deglobalization. So, their agenda is globalization, and Ukraine, of course. So,
Yeah, I mean, at least they got a chance they had a little compassion in their heart to eventually get to number 14, Ukraine. We might as well talk about it. I'm saying.
I mean, they're going to talk about Ukraine in their terms of what they talk about Ukraine. Like, how do we destroy Russia? How do we help keep control over our de facto neo-colonial state of Ukraine? Because a lot of people say Ukraine's a sovereign nation. It stopped being a sovereign nation the moment the United States put in their puppet. And then, of course, the rest is history. So there's a list of participants. I'm not going to say all of them, but you guys can see in slides 20. There's just so many familiar names too, for like important people. There are some media people too, but they're part of it. They're not there to question. They're there to, really just go along with the agenda. CEOs from AG. You have
Albert Bourla is another name to pay attention to. CEO of Pfizer's there, as well as Bill Burns.
Yep. Then slide 21, you guys can see more of these names. There's just so many people of power in this. So you can't tell me that this isn't something important to come in there. You can see Henry Kissinger's name, Reid Hoffman, just so many different,
I don't understand Patrice is still just hanging around, man.
I was thinking that when I saw that.
The surprising names, I don't think it's super surprising to see that Stacey Abrams was one of the attendees and one of the chairs.
Yeah, we're going to show that too, because you caught that. And I was like, wow, this is, I don't expect less from her, but that's really nefarious in my eyes. Kristen Sinema too, another name.
Well, I think the Center for American Progress for Stacey Abrams was a stepping stone to get to Bilderberg. So congratulations, Stacey Abrams. You made it to the top.
Yeah. So it's crazy. We got a sitting Senator Jake Sullivan, of course, like we mentioned. And so Pasta, you said, yes, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Stacey Abrams is co-chair of the globalist one world ruling government, predator class vulture organization. And you guys will see the steering committee co-chairs, and then you can see the members of the steering committee, including Stacey Abrams and other groups, other people. So really, it's everybody that you would expect.
I think Kevin Scott, too, the CTO of Microsoft, is something to think too about as well. A lot of people kind of don't mention that. They're quick to mention, Eric Schmidt, old CEO of Alphabet and Google parent company, all that shit. When obviously Peter Thiel, now we can see him playing both sides, which is crazy and stuff like that. But Kevin Scott from Microsoft, that's another one too as well, because I believe, and Oz, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of software that's used by the Pentagon, intelligence and whatnot that does come directly from Microsoft. So making sure that every single aspect of our tech companies are in play to ultimate control of what could be said, what can't be said. The ultimate security state you need to make sure that Microsoft is involved, and they are on the highest level as well.
All right, so let's go ahead and play Max's video. Basically, he did this whole thread, and he's, him and Franco both were one of the few people that actually went, and he said he attempted to enter the DC Mandarin's Oriental Hotel, which was kept secret. And all these people are there that we just mentioned. So you'll see how they reacted when he attempted to enter.
How you doing? All right. Max, is there an issue or?
Yes, you have.
Is it? Do I need a lanyard to go see reservations? So I need to. So no entry inside for the Bilderberg meeting of national security and big tech elites meeting in secret to discuss Ukraine.
Sure, I need to step over property.
Who's meeting in there?
I have no idea.
You don't know who you're doing security for? Okay. So they don't even tell you who you're
We
working
have
for.
no idea.
So that's how secretive the Bilderberg
I
meeting
have
is.
no idea what the Bilderberg is.
So none of you know who's inside. It's not a meeting of national security and big tech elites to discuss Ukraine and the global economy off the record. Well, allegedly, everyone from Peter Thiel to members of the National Security Council, NATO officials, big tech people like
I like the way they got it all
Even,
boarded up too around. I like they're doing some serious guarding.
even possibly Elon
Yeah, we
Musk
got
is
to
in
close
there.
it down to people.
They
The
refuse to
green fence has
say.
come
They're
out.
meeting completely off the record. No one is allowed to quote anyone in there. This is where people are saying they're meeting.
And you know, I don't believe that something that involves so many people and so many powerful people. I think they should have less privacy if they have that much power, and if they have that much control over the lives of so many. Then you become, I'm sorry, a de facto. If you want all that money, all that power, then you need to be what you discuss with all these powerful people needs to be open to the public, because that is something that the public needs to know about. And the fact that they can get away with this, and you know, very few people are talking about this, is really insane to me.
This has been going on for years too, as well. And it's a lot of people have been shut out. They call people security conspiracy theorists for even pointing the finger over here. But so
Yeah.
much of what they've said in the past has come, just come to fruition that you can't ignore these groups anymore. Especially this one. This is one of the top of the food chains. These are the policy makers right here, ladies and gentlemen. These are the policy makers. These and I personally think that you see a lot of junior members of here, whatnot, are kind of getting their marching orders from the senior members. You know what I'm saying? This is coming right from the top of my mind right here, the Bilderberg group. So, I'm glad that I think there's more people in the public who are becoming aware to it, but still not enough people. So it's good we're getting out there and showing people how private they're trying to be. Why are they trying to be so private? What do they have to hide? Why are all the CEOs with so many lawmakers together? You know what I'm saying? And you're right, 1000% right, fam. They should have to disclose everything that goes on in this meeting, because these people are, the ones who are making the policy, not from what we're told and not what we're sold about an elective democratic government. This is it right here.
Exactly. And so this next video, notice how this guy acts, and like we've experienced this before where they take your picture, but this is just watch.
There's more private security right here. And some sedans. They're not letting anyone that way. For the Bilderberg meeting? Were you in the Bilderberg meeting? Yes, you were in the Bilderberg meeting? You don't know. Were you in the meeting inside the hotel? Yes. It's an off-the-record meeting, I know, and it's secretive, but can you turn your lanyard around? Hi, Max Blumenthal. Were you... Why won't anyone say? It seems undemocratic. I mean, these are people who have a huge influence on policy. They're talking about a war right now that could turn into a world war.
Nuclear war.
A nuclear war, and they won't even say what they're saying.
That's democracy.
And many of them claim to be democratically elected leaders, but they're meeting in secret with leaders of multinational corporations and big tech and the defense industry.
Monarchy used to go to these things, fam. King and queens of Netherlands were always at these puppies, man. Forget about it, And
I mean, the fact that he's like, I don't know if I was. Come on, dude.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
know what you're doing. And I'm not going to show all the videos, but this is the one I am going to show. How Freeman reporter, and this is a guy that was in a video with another guy where they were talking about if you put it on your YouTube's Bilderberg, they're gonna like take you out like out the algorithm, and they're gonna throttle everything. And so he talked a little bit about the location and confirmed that it included the Dutch Prime Minister and Minister Mike Mullen. And yeah, so let's go ahead and watch that one.
Josh Friedman, you've been here since yesterday morning. Can you confirm this is the Bilderberg meeting?
I can confirm that, but it really took me a while to confirm that. The announcement about the meeting didn't come out until Thursday afternoon, so many of the participants had already been here. I arrived early Friday morning, and I had to do some scouting around, not just here, but elsewhere in DC to really confirm that it was happening here. And at that point, I really still hadn't confirmed it. Once I actually ran into Admiral Mike Mullen, retired chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was wearing his
uniform.
I wouldn't call it his
stripes.
I wouldn't call it not his uniform. He had his Bilderberg badge on.
Oh,
and
right.
The white ribbon around the neck. So that confirmed it. A couple other things. I got a photo of Dutch Prime Minister. So eventually, yes, I did confirm it, but it was not like years past. It really took a while.
Right. The hotel itself has been lying to people who call and said it was reserved by some Hong Kong business group.
I had not called the hotel, but I had heard that as when I showed up here early yesterday morning. I spoke to some neighbors, some people walking their dog who live in the area, and they told me that they were told that, yes, the hotel was rented out for the weekend by the Hong Kong government. At least that's what these neighbors told me.
Okay, and just like in 1 minute, why do you think it's significant to cover the Bilderberg meeting? What's happening here and what's wrong with it?
I travel around the world covering geopolitics, and to me this is first and foremost a geopolitics meeting, as it is every year. But I think this year is very significant for a few reasons. One, Bilderberg hasn't met since 2019. That's a long time. They've got a lot to discuss. A lot has obviously transpired since then. And then you also at this meeting have, with the backdrop of everything going on in Eastern Europe with Ukraine and Russia and Finland and Sweden's bid to join NATO, you have the Finnish Prime Minister here, I believe. You have, of course, Stoltenberg, the NATO chief. He's here very regularly. So you have the two of them presumably talking. I don't.
Finland, didn't they just join NATO, fam?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the whole thing, right? So, and of course, everybody's been talking about the fact that we might be in a nuclear war soon because the U.S. is pushing Russia's buttons by saying they're going to support, NATO's going to support rockets launching. And if they do that, Lavrov and others have already said that the Russia will respond. And these are these people. They're literally discussing such important things. And, you have this post on here. Who is the Bilderberg Group?
Yep. Well, I wanted to show a little clip, and I wanted to show a little bit from Jason Burmis, who came on the show. He's the one who really got the whistle out there. I think it was that gentleman's video he showed. They kind of collaborated together, Jason and someone else. I don't know if it was this gentleman in particular, but when he was on the show Friday, he was like, that's it. Sound the alarms. Like Jason was ready to jump in the car and drive like nonstop to try to get there. That's how, how long he's been covering this. Now, he's got a bunch of videos, documentaries on his website. On YouTube, they're still there until they take them down. In the first time I learned a lot about it was Shade, the motion picture, where you had like a 20-minute group talking about what's going on with the Bilderberg Group, and all the old school people were there. Mike Tracy was there. Of course, your boy Alex Jones showed up and whatnot. There was a lot more people back then because I had a little bit more jump on the information. And guys like him and Luke Radowski have been talking about this for quite some time. Here's a little video. I just took a little clip of it from kind of discussing and telling and explaining to people what the Bilderberg Group is, because, there's a lot of people who've been, going through life, fam. They've been taught to say that Congress are elected people that decide and make policy and then eventually try to get that to, be enacted. They're not. They're just the policy enforcers. The policy makers are coming from these groups right here, the Bilderberg Group. So take a little quick look at this video. Just got a couple minutes of it.
54, that is even smaller in number and has a greater influence on world events. Meet the Bilderberg Group. This elite group meet annually around the globe. There is a core group of members who have attended every year for decades, such as David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. These members invite others who are politically and socially relevant at the time. Each year, around 140 people are in attendance.
Real quick, I asked you this question. You attended the meeting in Italy called the Bilderberg Group. I just want to know what you were doing out there, what that was all about. Because she lied to me and told me she didn't go. I figured you might tell me the truth.
All I did was go. They had a Republican and a Democrat. I gave like a 20-minute talk on the presidential election.
You didn't have anything to do with being John Kerry's running mate? You're talking about that at all?
No, because I wanted his running mate.
I happened to be in Europe then on my way to Russia. I was invited to go to Bilderberg by Vernon Jordan, a friend of mine and a genuine hero of the civil rights movement. And to the best of my knowledge, NAFTA was not discussed by anybody in my presence.
Documents released by the group in 2001 revealed that in September of 1955, the group met in Germany and covertly outlined the idea of a European Union. Section E, European Unity, discusses the general support for European integration and unification, and the idea to unify Germany once again with the rest of Europe under a common marketplace. Belgian Viscount and current Bilderberg chairman Etienne Davignon told the EU Observer in 2009 that the next Bilderberg meeting could improve understanding on future action in the same way it helped create the euro in the 1990s. This illustrates the patience, vision, and reach of this organization. It was able to promote and establish both the European Union and a European currency over the course of just under 40 years.
Think about that, how you can start a European Union along with a European currency and European cooperation in military actions. And then that's what started. That's what came out of the Bilderberg Group. They outlined it. This is what we're going to do. They put it in place. And that's when you have a lot of people who can come together of that significance, of that much power. Here's another tweet we have as well. I wanted to put this one up as well because it was just one of the first tweets I shared by Teddy Schleifer. And here are the Silicon Valley folks participating in the Bilderberg Conference held in Washington this weekend. Sam Altman, Eric Schmidt, Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, Alan Karp from Palantir, Jan LeCun, and Kevin Scott, which we just talked about just recently. All the heads of big value are there to take their marching orders, to understand who they're allowed to, who they have to censor, who they're allowed to let speak, who they're allowed to let thrive. It is complete control. And here's just something I pulled off from Wikipedia about who Peter Thiel is. Peter Thiel is a Danish philosopher. They try to say stuff. Peter Andres Thiel, a German-American billionaire, entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and political activist, the co-founder of PayPal, Palantir Technologies, and Founders Fund. He was the first outside investor of Facebook. As of May 2022, Thiel had an estimated worth of 7.19 billion and was ranked 279th on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. And here, as we know, Peter Thiel then invested in Facebook. Slide number 35. Facebook director Peter Thiel invests conservatives. Then he invests in Rumble. So now we're controlling both left and right media out there. Mike Tracy made a tweet. Recent fans of Peter Thiel seem rather surprised that he's a Bilderberg attendee, given the nature of the right-wing causes he currently funds. Joke's on you then. This is at least his 12th meeting since 2007. Few have ever evinced greater dedication to cause of globalism. And that is Peter Thiel. And that's something to kind of point out, something we have to realize. The fact is that you think that a lot of people, because they're conservative, they're fighting against this whole machine. No, they're actually part of the machine. Peter Thiel is just that. So when people go running to Rumble thinking it's a beacon of free speech and safety and whatnot, they are completely being duped. Luke Randowski, one of those guys, old school, like what Max just did showing up, that's been done for years by guys like Jason Berman, Luke Randowski. One of the things I remember watching was Bilderberg in 2019, where Luke Randowski ran into Eric Schmidt, who just left Google and the parent company Alphabet. And once again, a guy who's got a lot of tentacles in control of speech. Take a look at Luke Randowski, slide number 37, running around the streets with Eric Schmidt.
Of course, our YouTube and Gmail accounts were never the same. We were one of the first channels on YouTube to be hit with demonetization, and of course, many people, even popular channels like the Ron Paul channel, complained that whenever they put my name in the description or tags or anywhere on their videos would be automatically demonetized. Over 12 people I have confirmed now, whenever they put my name anywhere on YouTube, or We Are Change's name, the name of this YouTube channel, their videos were automatically hit, downranked in the algorithm with, of course, demonetization. That's why our future, our journalism, our investigations here most likely don't have a future. So please consider signing up on our email list, which again is a free email list. We send out one email, if that, once a week, just so we can have communication with you one-on-one to avoid censorship and keep independent media alive. Now here's the confrontation and my breakdown afterward. Mr. Eric Schmidt, how are you? Hope you're having a good day. My name is Luke Radowski of We Are Change.org. Is it okay if I ask you a couple questions? I see you're having a nice stroll here in Switzerland. How are you? How's your day?
Mr. Schmidt, there's a lot of big tech people here this year. There were last year as well. And since then, we've seen the removal of a lot of conservative voices online. Is that stemming from discussions at Bilderberg?
What's your take, especially with your role that you played in the fake news kind of dialectic that you put out there with the nonprofits that you supported? You work close with Hillary Clinton, and there does seem to be some kind of collusion. Believe this? Well, I'm asking you.
You clearly do. Okay.
Well, let's not curse here. We don't want this video to be demonetized on YouTube.
Let's correct the narrative. I mean,
yeah, you can
does
correct.
Google have a political stance? Maybe that's
enjoy your evening.
If we're incorrect, we would love to have a word from you to correct the record, civilly, without curse words.
A neutral company.
Well, he's no longer at Google. He's no longer at Alphabet. He left.
Yeah.
Eric Schmidt, I just want to leave the opportunity. Eric Schmidt, I just want to leave you the opportunity. If you ever want to have a clarification of the facts, we would love to hear you out. We would love to have any statement from you. We would love to open up a dialogue. I think it would be great to converse with one another. And if you believe that that was doo-doo, we would need a little bit more evidence because everything else points to the contrary of that. All right, Mr. Schmidt, have a good one. And this is why we have online censorship, because secretive establishment billionaires don't like investigative journalism. Now, there's a couple of important things I wanted to mention in this video, specifically about the questions I was bringing up with some contextual background here, because again, this was a very random confrontation. We were about to walk down a totally different street until I said, no, I don't know why. Let's just walk down this street. And as soon as we started walking down, literally, Eric Schmidt is walking directly towards us. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about specifically with Eric Schmidt was the fact that it was his company and him that funded a nonprofit called First Draft, which, according to all the records, looks like it was the first nonprofit to use the term fake news in our political dialogue before any war.
So there you go. That was the reason why we saw a lot of censorship. The one thing I want to do correct, it wasn't Luke Radowski, it was somebody walking with him saying, we've seen the removal from a lot of conservative voices. Conservative voices aren't the only ones that removed or demonetized. As you know, we're sitting here right now, me and Fee, we started this channel. We were considered leftists for many years. We've been shut down. We've been silenced. You know what I'm saying? So it's any dissenting voice, anybody who's pushing back up against the government, and that's what we're seeing right now. And the fact that, you know, this is, and like I said, I was one of the first videos that kind of really turned me on to Luke Radowski when I saw it in 2019, because I wasn't in his circle. I wasn't in that echo chamber. I was outside of it. And then I went to look at a lot of his work. He's done outstanding work when it comes to the Epstein cases and whatnot. You can occasionally catch Luke most of the time on Tim Pool's channel. But that was just some amazing work he caught right back then. And yeah, this is what we were talking about for many years. That's why you have a fence now. That's why you have a gate there in the Mandarin in DC, because they don't want like situations like this to happen over and over again, because they were constantly happening as more people were getting caught. One person I think didn't want to get caught this weekend as well. Her name is Kristen Sinema. As you know, she is too busy to provide Arizona with regular health care. She's at Bilderberg meeting with Pharma CEO. And she's there kind of hanging out, you know, and they've been making this whole kind of situation when they're making her look like a maverick where she's pushing back, hanging out with these CEOs and tech behemoths. Predictably, she's shoveling precious public funds to extend big tech telehealth care services, and because that's the marching orders she gets. And you can see her here, slide 39, Kristen Simona, named one of the Times most 100 influential people of 2022. So you can see that they're using their media tactics and whatnot, their media goons to push Kristen Sinema while she's there taking marching orders from a bunch of global elitist. Slide 40, which is another getter. We have to throw a little getter into the mix because the conservatives deserve a little love in this particular situation because it was mostly a lot of them that were at these meetings trying to figure them out, whatnot. This might be new to a lot of some leftists around there and whatnot, but it's time to open your eyes because it's not Congress who's calling the shots. It's these guys. This is the obsolete man, and it has all the names we talked about. James Baker, Office of Secretary of Defense of the Pentagon. Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer. That guy's been running his mouth left and right. Now you know what he's all about. He's here at Bilderberg. He's got to get his marching orders from the elites as well. Collaborate with them. Bill Burns, head of the CIA. Does that one surprise you? I don't think so. And the names go on and on. All the names we mentioned, Kevin Scott, Jake Sullivan, another one there. All the heads, all the people who make these incredible important decisions are there at Bilderberg. It is wrapping up today, and they will be off like a prom dress as they have gotten all their stories together, all their lines together, all their plans together. That is what's going on at Bilderberg, and that's what we have to expect. And I'm glad we're getting some eyes on this situation. People are starting to take it of some serious importance, and that's what we need to continue to do because these seem to be the people who are pushing our policy, not the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, the Kevin McCarthy's, and whatnot. So thank you all who joined us in today. 300 plus people on the YouTubes. That's great. We only had about 58 on the Rockford. We had some issues with the channel earlier today. That was probably on my end, and I do apologize, but we'll be back up tomorrow. Oz, I'm going to give you a buzz. We'll make sure we'll find a time that works best for both of us, but tomorrow we'll go over some stuff when it comes to Pfizer. I don't know if you guys know this, but Pfizer is now going to look like they're going to get an FDA emergency use authorization on a shot, okaying 6-month-old child to 4-year-olds. Remember, they already have up to 5-year-olds. So now it looks like they're going all the way. And we've also kind of discussed in this show, we've showed clips from Robert Kennedy Jr. explaining why they try to push for it when it comes to get to kids, because then it provides them the ultimate protection under the laws of the land. So thank you all who joined in today. We love you there. Thank you to Fiorella, Oz on the 1s and 2s. Pasta Jardula here. Convo out. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you to all who gave to our givesendgo.com/support the Convo Couch, who helped us out in Colombia. You guys were amazing. It was an amazing time and a crazy experience. Aram did give it. Oh, it was on the. Okay, Aram, always, always, always one of the greatest loves we have. I almost said producer. She said, I'm not a producer. She's a subscriber. She's a follower. Well, thank you so much, Aram. Whatever you are, we love you. And we thank you all who always help out over here. Pasta, just add the visor, not the Pfizer. That's how we're going to wrap up the show. For Pasta Jardula, Oz, Fee, and the Convo Couch, we'll see you tomorrow. Convo out.